Alright, so everybody's making theories, everybody's talking about, FF7 Rebirth and what's gonna potentially happen and how things is gonna go, and essentially all that type of jazz. And essentially I want to get my 2 cents out there. Now, if you paid attention to one of my videos, I think maybe the video after the Summer Game Fest, I ended up talking about a theory that, about what I think is gonna happen, and I'll just basically tell you again in this video. And essentially I want to kind of just go ahead and break it all down in a way I think this will happen. And honestly, I can kind of see it happening this way, mainly because how could you make, one of the most dramatic ass games that ever existed even more dramatic with an alternate timeline? You kind of make Sephiroth and then you clone his ass again. Let me explain. When it comes down to things, Zack's timeline is a thing, and whether you don't like it or not, it is. And when it comes down to things, we know that in Zack's timeline, thanks to the trailer that we gotten recently, is that a tornado ripped through the entirety of Sector 0, 1, and 2, which if you pause the beginning of the video and try to go frame by frame, you will see it. I didn't even see it till just recently. And when it comes down to things, you also see the scene of what happened in the aftermath. And, Tifa, Barrett, Red 13 and Aeriths freaking bodied. They got yeeted. Whether they're dead or not, we don't necessarily know completely, but they're most likely not going after people or Sephiroth or whatever, anytime soon. Most likely that's going to be the case. Enter Zack, because this is his timeline and he's alive for some damn reason. And essentially what's going to end up happening is that he's going to obviously go on his journey and pretty much go to the Northern Crater just like the OG team is in a regular ass timeline. Whether he'll have a team of people that he'll be vibing with, I don't necessarily know. But if it does be the case that he will be vibing with a team, most likely it's going to be, what was left of Avalanche in some weird way. Maybe it's going to be Wedge and Biggs, and if Jessie is somehow still around, most likely she's going to be there, I do feel like, though, if we do see Jessie again, I'm going to take a wild ass guess that we'll see her at Golden Saucer in Zack's timeline. I don't know how that exactly would play out. Maybe she has amnesia or something like that, and then Zack has to kind of figure something out and they had to get her memories back in some shape and form. I don't necessarily know how they're going to show that off in the game, because we're also doing the original timeline, and that's kind of like a thing that I'm kind of wondering how they're going to do that, because I ain't going to say a lie. Trying to mix and mash it together with this new story is kind of going to be difficult, but I do feel like that would be something that could happen in some shape or form. It doesn't have to be like a long segment of getting Jessie's memories back or something, but it could be something that, helps in some shape or form to give her some interesting story instead of being the thirsty ass chick that wants to suck Cloud's dick. But when it comes down to things, I know what you're also asking, where the hell is Cloud? In the trailer, you got to see where Cloud was. He's walking in some dusty ass place with the green ass mist that's everywhere, speaking about some reunion like he going to the cookout, which he not this version of Cloud. You stay your ass there, your ass go to the, I don't know, the damn pool or some shit, I don't know. But point is, he's out here talking about reunion, freaking the hell out, not necessarily knowing what the hell's going on. So that basically kind of tells you that, Zack got Cloud missing in his timeline. How is that possible? We don't know, because in the end of Integrate, we don't necessarily know where the hell Cloud is actually at. We know Zack brought him in, but we don't know where Cloud is actually at this time, And, again, same kind of thing with, and I think people were talking about how they didn't necessarily know where Aerith was. Again, Integrate, Aerith, Zack was kind of tripping like, yo, where Aerith at? And everybody was like crying and, in a whole ass church and whatever, in whatever sector she was from. Why would people be in a church, crying or whatever, after a massive ass tornado? A shelter, obviously. So when it comes down to things, that's what you're basically gonna get. And essentially, that's kind of how that kind of goes. So maybe the whole thing with Zack is that he just got to find Cloud and figure some shit out, and then they'll start figuring things out in their own timeline and kind of going to the same places as OG, and stuff like that, right? That's essentially what that's going to lead up to. Now, where we'll see the timeline converge, I don't necessarily know. It could be in Niflheim, it could be at Northern Crater, it could be somewhere else. I don't necessarily know, and that's just something that just not up to my knowledge. But when it comes down to things, with Cloud basically going on that reunion tip and just freaking the hell out, essentially what this does is show that in the original timeline, obviously when we saw this scene the first time, it was Sephiroth or whoever it was that was, you know, falling, you know, his where he needed to go. And essentially Cloud is now doing the same thing. And so when it comes down to things, you already know what those people are. I'm not gonna necessarily say it because that was kind of a huge thing that I didn't realize honestly until I played the original game like a year or two ago. And essentially, I'm not gonna say what it is, but they're all going to the same place where, you know, Sephiroth is, and they have a big connection with him. But when it comes down to things, out of all the people that has a connection with him, Cloud does too, equally just as much as those people. And when it comes down to things, it wouldn't be too surprising if something kind of happens where Sephiroth makes Cloud in that timeline a clone of himself. You know, because they're equally pretty much kind of linked in some shape and form. Now you're probably wondering, why did I come to the conclusion that there is a reason why, you know, Sephiroth will turn Cloud into Sephiroth number 2? I have a few reasons. Well, when you think about it, when you look at both timelines, what do they both have in common? They both have 2 of the same people. There's 2 Tifas, which, goodness gracious, that sounds like a good time, 2 Aeriths, 2 Red 13s, 2 Aeriths, and practically 2 of everybody else. Why is there not 2 of Sephiroth though? Right? We know Sephiroth can do illusions and, you know, host party tricks and will be good for children's birthdays, but when it comes down to things, there's not 2 Sephiroths that we've seen, or at least we know of. We know that there is some Sephiroth influence, but we don't know if there's more than just the one. We do know that, you know, there is the theory that out there that's like the 4 realms, and, you know, there's 4 different Sephiroths, like the flashback and your illusion version, and it's like another damn version of Sephiroth, but I don't think it's going to be that. I do think that I think one possibility of what could happen is essentially the same Sephiroth in the OG timeline is still doing the same BS, but affecting 2 different timelines. So he's not just, you know, effing with Cloud in the original timeline, he's also trying to pull Cloud in the other Zack timeline too. You know, Zack is not really someone that he cares about, so he's probably not going to really mess with him, honestly. So because Sephiroth probably doesn't even, you know, think Zack is there in some shape and form. Maybe, who knows? But when it comes down to things, he still knows that Cloud is out there, so he's going to pull for that one. Because if you remember too, there's a reason why he can do this. Because at the end of base FF7 remake, essentially, he asked Cloud, yo, let's defy destinies together, my boy. I mean, with that sexy ass hair you got, I'm pretty sure you want to defy some destiny, right? And so essentially, Cloud's like, nah, you can stay over there, you hoe ass dude. And so Sephiroth's like, heh, alright then. But I think that was like maybe Sephiroth's first attempt at trying to get Cloud over to his side, right? Maybe that was his first attempt. He's like, alright, so you don't want to play ball? Alright then, I'll just go to a different timeline, and then I'll go ahead and just get the Cloud from that one, and then he can be my bitch. And that's essentially what I'm thinking that's what he's doing, right? If this Cloud won't cooperate, then I'll just go to a different timeline and just go ahead and get that Cloud. Now, my biggest question I would say is, why does Sephiroth be able to control multiple timelines? Why is that a thing? Why was the plot ghost a thing in the first damn place? That's really what I want to know. The plot ghost was like the biggest thing that we don't necessarily know anything about outside of, oh, they didn't want to F with the OG timeline and everything stays the same. That's kind of like the biggest thing. If they don't explain that right, that makes this whole thing kind of basically fall apart with the game. But anyway, essentially, that's the reason why you have, you know, why I say that Cloud could potentially become Sephiroth 2, you know, because there's, again, 2 different timelines, 2 of everybody, and if one is not going to cooperate in one timeline, might as well go get my other self. It's like some black, if you ever seen, you know, Dragon Ball Super, it's basically Goku Black, right? Why not pull that shit? And that would be like a dramatic ass thing that could happen, and he successfully turns Cloud into Sephiroth 2. That would be kind of like a thing that could happen. He basically teamed up with himself for himself. Like, that's some narcissism and literally self-love on a whole new level, honestly. So he can literally turn into Goku Black and Zamasu. Honestly, about to be out here trying to purge all the mortals in the multiverse. That I can deadass see him pulling a Zamasu, honestly. And I would not be surprised if that is the case. But, you know, like I said, that also, when it comes down to things, kinda is like the only way I can see things kind of working out, though. Taking it to a dramatic step and not overly complicating the story, because FF7 doesn't need to be complicated, honestly. Like, it's already complicated with who's telling the truth of the narrative of what's going on with Cloud's POV, and then Tifa's Titty's POV, and then you also have like Sephiroth kind of influencing shit and how everything else with the rest of the party. So you don't really need to overcomplicate what everything else is. You know, even with Zack's timeline, if you make it two different Sephiroths and they all have the same, and they both have the same goal, then that makes sense. You know, again, you don't need to overcomplicate it, but that is something that could happen. And if he's not necessarily going to have Cloud basically be Sephiroth 2, but a backup version of Sephiroth, then that kind of goes with another theory I've thought about, which is second Aerith Marlene. Now, essentially, this might be a little wild and out there, but if you remember back when, you know, they were about to, the Turks, I think, was about to, you know, shoot down the sector's tower and make it crash on the city, or the slums, really. And essentially, when it comes down to things, Aerith had to go find Marlene, and essentially, she did find her. But while Marlene was freaking the hell out because she's a child, of course she is, essentially she ends up stopping because of some timeline nonsense effects. And no one has explained that shit since we've seen it. Now, when it comes down to things, I think what just happened there is that secretly Aerith implanted Aerith number 2 within Marlene somehow. I don't know how, and I don't know in what way. But considering the fact that if Aerith is dead in Zack's timeline, there should be, maybe somehow, in some shape and form, another Aerith in Marlene, maybe. I don't necessarily, again, know how. I don't know why. But why would they do this to her if this wasn't even... Which, honestly, this wasn't even in OG. Honestly, Marlene just dipped off from the story in the OG game, from what I remember. She only showed up at the very end with the meteor about to basically F everybody in the ass. That's essentially what happened, because we didn't see her. So the fact that they gave Marlene something to do, or is going to give her something to do, which probably will happen in part 3 and not in part 2, but when it comes down to things, the fact that they gave her something to do is curious and very interesting. I would say if you're gonna pay attention to any character going on in how FF7 is gonna be for the rest of the series, I would say pay attention to Marlene, because that girl is gonna have something. Maybe she's gonna be the person that casts Holy. Maybe she'll have some type of ancient power inside her that Aerith passed to her, or something like that, you know? Because let's be honest, when Aerith, you know, tried to find Marlene that one time, she saw something or felt something and then said, nah, keep that a secret, because she knows something. So something is clearly off when it comes to Aerith. She knows maybe that, I don't know, maybe possibly something will be okay. There's something in the future that will be okay. I'm certain that she saw a vision of something, or maybe saw something within Marlene that caused her to be thinking that, you know, everything's gonna be fine and everything's gonna be, you know, pretty okay. I do think that something is going to happen. If they dropped the ball on that, then what the hell was the point of, you know, showing that one scene? But, you know, it just, because, and it's not necessarily something that Aerith did. Aerith didn't know, because even Aerith was like, huh? Because she didn't know. So, I don't necessarily know how and in what way. I do think Marlene will be like an Aerith 2 sort of situation, or a backup Aerith in some shape and form. Maybe instead of, you know, when you get to that point where Aerith is literally about to get killed off, maybe in some shape and form, something happens where she doesn't have the chance to cast Holy. Or maybe something happens where, you know, Aerith still dies, but, you know, again, backup Aerith kind of happens, and Marlene is the second Aerith that kind of come through and save everybody's ass. Again, I don't necessarily know, but that would be kind of interesting, honestly. So when it comes down to things, overall, this is just a big ass rambling ass thing, and maybe this doesn't make any type of sense. And maybe I'm just jumping through hoops trying to make shit make sense. But I do believe that there is going to be a, second Sephiroth via Cloud in Zack's timeline. And I do think that, obviously Marlene is going to be a part of that story, probably in part 3. And something big is going to happen with her, with maybe something that Aerith left her with, or something like that. Or maybe she becomes Aerith number 2, like how that just might just how honestly it might be. That just might be what it is. And if you really want to pull it into a stretching sort of situation, most likely the timelines is going to converge, and most likely they're going to have to deal with 2 Sephiroths, if not a fused version of Cloud and Sephiroth, and that's going to have to be a case, and that's going to be like an ultimate new type of fusion that, will be like the end of the game last boss type of character. And because you're probably thinking, well, if Cloud becomes Sephiroth 2, then, who will be the Cloud in that timeline? Zack. And that's why you have Cloud in one timeline of the OG, and Zack in the, weird ass different timeline and stuff like that, So I do genuinely think that something like that is going to be the case where we're going to have Zack basically be Cloud 2 or some shit like that. And the biggest question I would say maybe after that will be like, what happens to Zack after they defeat Sephiroth, or what happens once that's over and essentially done? Where does Zack go essentially? That's a good ass question. Now the only thing I could think of, and I don't know how they will pull this off because I don't think they're gonna do this, but this would be hilarious, is that they pull a Master Aeriths situation. If you don't know Kingdom Hearts 3, you really missing out. But when it comes down to things, what happened with Kingdom Hearts 3's ending, Terra did, have Master Aeriths in his body because he put his heart inside Terra's body. So I wouldn't be surprised maybe Marlene had maybe a bit of Aerith in her, and maybe she came out and Zack had her and took her back to that timeline, or maybe just stayed in that timeline and Aerith still somehow is alive. Now that would be kind of dope. If Aerith can somehow come back to life or something like that, or had a backup plan, that would be kind of dope. I'm not gonna lie, but again, that's really stretching, and I don't necessarily know how that would connect at all. But we'll see what kind of happens. But essentially, that's my theory on what I think it's going to come down to. I think there's going to be 2 Sephiroths, 2 Clouds, and 2 Aeriths. And, with obviously Sephiroth 2 will be Cloud in Zack's timeline. Cloud 2 will be Zack, obviously, in his own damn timeline. And then Aerith 2 will be Marlene in the original timeline. But, something weird kind of happens with that, And that's kind of hilarious how the whole OG timeline too, if you really think about it, with Marlene included, the whole OG timeline is going to be pretty much the same shit that we already seen and played through and know, but outside of Aerith and Marlene's moment being like the one discrepancy in the entire shit. Like, that is hilarious to me. The fact that Marlene might actually have something to do and possibly could save people, or cast Holy, or whatever the hell, or back up Aerith in some shape and form, it's going to be hilarious. I do think Marlene is going to have a big role to do with something in this. I just don't know what. But anyway, that's essentially all I really wanted to say for this one. I really just wanted to kind of, I guess, focus a little bit more on this, honestly, because this was just something that was just a bit more interesting, I would say, And then, who the hell knows what could happen in part 3? We might see freaking Genesis. We might see some other people that I don't necessarily know too much about when it comes down to things. We might see the person that maybe Yuffie was fighting in her, DLC with the both boss fights and stuff like that. We might see something like that happen and they come through. We don't know, but it's interesting to kind of think about, honestly. So you never really know what can happen in part 3, but that's where I'm going to basically end off the video here. Hopefully, again, I made some type of sense. If I didn't, shut up. But when it comes down to things, that's essentially all I have to say, so hopefully you did enjoy. If you did, be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification way out. Also, follow me on the socials, and if you'd like to donate to the channel, Patreon is available as well. And until then, it's your boy Jay, sign off. How about I say?